across Africa and around the world. A very warm welcome to the inaugural Technical Assistance webinar of the Capacity Building Alliance of Sustainable Investment, co-hosted with the Securities and Exchange Commission of Zambia and supported by the ESG Exchange. I'm Chen Ling from CASI and head of the CASI Secretariat, and it's my great honor to open this important session today as we come together to focus on strengthening the readiness for sustainability reporting in Zambia and across Africa. We gather at a pivotal moment for Zambia's sustainability journey. The country has taken meaningful strides forwards, and also from advancing alignment with ISSB standards through stakeholder engagement and readiness assessments to the holistic launch of its national green taxonomy in December last year. These milestones lay a critical institutional foundation for sustainable economic activity and signal a clear regulatory shift towards robust sustainability agenda. Yet, as recent research has highlighted, significant challenges remain. Framework gaps, limited capacity, and also regulators for issuers and regulators alike. Comparatively weak integration of climate risk into decision-making among the preparers, and also high implementation costs, and also, more importantly, scarce and reliable climate data. These barriers are not unique to Zambia. They resonate across emerging markets in Africa and the whole world, making our dialogue today all the more urgent and relevant. That is exactly why this CASI TA program exists, to address these gaps through a phased, practical, and stakeholder-centric approach. This inaugural webinar is our first step. It's an open platform for knowledge sharing, learning, and collaboration. Over the next 3 hours, we will hear from leading experts, regulators, and practitioners on regulatory expectations, capital market perspectives, lessons from other emerging developing economies, and real-world good practices in sustainability disclosure. We will also engage in a dynamic multi-stakeholder panel discussion to dig into the on-the-ground challenges of translating global and into action and identify priority capital building needs for Zambia and the broader African continent. On our objectives today, it is very clear. We want to narrow awareness and skills gaps in sustainability disclosure, to clarify what is reliable decision useful information reporting and what it looks like, to foster collaboration across the entire reporting ecosystem, and to help the Zambia stakeholders to unlock the full potential of green and transition service. This webinar is not just about sharing knowledge, it's about listening. Your insights, your feedback, and on-the-ground experiences will shape the design of CASI's follow-up TA activities, ensuring our support is targeted, effective, and tailored to the unique needs. We will have an exceptional lineup of speakers and panelists with deep expertise across regulation, capital markets, international standards, and industry practice, and I encourage you all to actively participate in our Q&A and open discussion sessions later today. Your voice is key to this collective effort. Before formally kicking off this event, please look at the agenda. We hope to finish in 3 hours. So we will have 4 presentations in the beginning, after the welcome remarks, and then followed by 10 minutes Q&A. And then we will have a multi-stakeholder panel discussion focusing on the bridge of sustainability capacity gaps in Zambia, and then another round of open discussion and Q&A. So we hope to conclude around 12 noon time, local time, or maybe 6 p.m. in Beijing or East Asia. So without further ado, let me begin this important journey together by inviting Dr. Ma, who is the chairman of CASI, and he will deliver welcome remarks through a recorded video, because unfortunately he's traveling today and the time zone doesn't really allow. So with that, let's make this webinar a transformative start to building a stronger, more sustainable reporting ecosystem in Zambia and across Africa.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Ma Jun. I'm the chairman of the Capacity Building Alliance of Sustainable Investment. It's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this TA webinar, which focuses on strengthening capacity for sustainability reporting in Zambia and across Africa. On behalf of CASI, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to each of you for joining this important event. This webinar marks a key step in CASI's ongoing effort to support emerging market and developing economies in building capacity for sustainable investment, including for sustainability disclosure. I would also like to extend our gratitude to our co-hosts, the Securities Exchange Commission of Zambia, and to our supporting organization, the ESG Exchange, for their leadership and partnership in making this webinar possible. Zambia is entering an important phase in developing its sustainable finance ecosystem. With the official launch of its national green taxonomy in December 2025, an ongoing effort in sustainability disclosure, the country is laying the foundation for rapid growth for sustainable finance. The Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants has mandated that public companies adopt IFRS S1 and S2 starting from January this year. This represents a significant move to strengthen expectations around transparency and sustainability-related information in the market. At the same time, we're still facing a lot of challenges. Framework gaps, limited technical capacity, data availability issues, and implementation costs are all hurdles that companies face as they seek to integrate sustainability into governance, financing, and operational decision-making. This is precisely where CASI hopes to contribute. CASI was established as a global platform dedicated to supporting EMDEs through capacity building and technical assistance in sustainable finance. Over the past 2 years, CASI has established a network of 70 leading organizations and have provided training to nearly 9,000 professionals from 100 countries. Today's TA program is specially designed to bridge some of knowledge gaps through a practical, phased approach, helping Zambia and the broader African market to strengthen their readiness for sustainability reporting. Over the next few hours, we will hear from regulators, standard setters, financial institutions, and other stakeholders on topics ranging from regulatory expectation, investor perspectives, disclosure practices, to lessons from other emerging market economies. Importantly, today's webinar is only the starting point of a broader engagement. Following this session, CASI will gather feedback from participants to better understand the capacity building needs of stakeholders in Zambia and across the region. To complement this event today, CASI will provide all participants with free access to some of our online learning courses on CASI Academy. Looking ahead, CASI will also host a major sustainability forum in Morocco later this year, which will bring together policymakers, regulators, financial institutions, and international experts to continue our dialogue. We warmly welcome all of you from Zambia and stakeholders across Africa to join us in Morocco. Based on the needs identified today, CASI will also be pleased to explore organizing tailored in-person technical assistance program to address some specific implementation challenges related to disclosure and other sustainable finance-related topics. Once again, I would like to thank our co-hosts, supporting organizations, and all of you for your engagement and commitment to this important cause. I wish today's event a big success. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Ma, for the warm welcome and also the information. So as he said, everyone who joined today will have a chance to have pilot use to the CASI Academy, which covers 12 different topics of online learning contents in the format of video. And it's also including a few modules on sustainability disclosure. So everyone, please looking forward to an email coming from CASI Secretariat. With that, let's come into the second part of today's event. We're going to line up 4 presentations. And the first one will be focusing on regulatory expectations. Well, let's welcome Mwaba, Director of Standards and Regulation from Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Thank you very much. Just give me a few minutes. I share the presentation so that we can be seeing it. Yeah.
No problem. It's coming in already.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay.
Oh. Sorry. No, please feel free to share your screen.
Okay.
Coming.
Okay. Is the presentation visible? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So Yes. So we were asked to speak on the regulatory expectations from ZICA's perspective. Yeah, so the presentation, yeah, we'll look at the topics, basically just highlight on, we'll give an introduction, we'll give sustainability disclosure requirements, supervisory priorities, timelines, and then common compliance gaps. So beginning with the introduction, just to state that sustainability reporting in Zambia is in its early stages, and it is expected to grow with ZICA having adopted the ISSB Sustainability Standards IFRS S1 and S2, as well as the Integrated Reporting Framework. These took effect on 1st January 2025. Reporting was expected in the annual reports for 2026, but this was extended to 2027. So reporting will begin in 2027. The standards are expected to be adopted on a compulsory basis for all listed companies, whereas all other organizations for now are expected to implement the standard on a voluntary basis. And then for the integrated reporting framework, of course, all organizations, including listed companies, are expected to implement this on a voluntary basis. And then we will be observing how the implementation goes. And then as we see how things will be, what challenges are faced, then we will then move on to roll out implementation of the standards to other organizations such as public companies and other large organizations like the mining companies as well. And then after that, then we'll spread over to other organizations. Yeah. In terms of the disclosure requirements, ZICA has fully adopted IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. Now, in terms of summary requirements for IFRS S1, I would just like to state the following, that, the IFRS S1 sets the general requirements for disclosure of sustainability-related financial information. And the objective is to require an entity to disclose information about its sustainability-related risks and opportunities that is useful to primary users of general purpose financial reports in making decisions relating to providing resources to an entity. Yeah. Something that is important about the disclosure requirements, the IFRS S1 disclosure requirements, is the issue to do with materiality. The standard requires disclosure of material information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect the entity's cash flow, its access to finance, or cost of capital over the short, medium, or long term. So in other words, the standards, what it requires is that the information that is going to be reported on sustainability-related risks and opportunities is information that is material. You will not disclose just about everything. You will only disclose information which is considered to be material. In other words, material information is information which, if omitted or misstated or obscured, could reasonably be expected to influence the decisions of primary users of general purpose financial reports. So in other words, information which will be reported is that information which, if it's omitted or misstated or obscured, can reasonably affect or is expected to influence the decisions of primary users who are like the shareholders in the, or the people who have shares in the organization. So the decisions that they make, if it's going to be impacted, the decisions that they make in terms of giving funds to the organization, if that is going to be impacted, then that information can be considered to be material. And in that regard, then such information on sustainability-related risks and opportunities should be disclosed if it falls in that category. Yeah. Also, in terms of the reporting entity to which the information should be reported, this should be exactly the same entity as the one for which the related financial statements are produced. So if financial statements are produced for an organization X, an organization code X, then it means that the disclosures for IFRS S1 should also be for that particular entity. And then in terms of the core content, the IFRS S1 gives 4 areas which should be reported on. And those areas are governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. So in terms of governance, summary is that the governance processes, controls, and procedures the entity uses to monitor and manage sustainability-related risks and opportunities are the ones which should be considered under governance. And then for strategy, this is the approach the entity uses to manage sustainability-related risks and opportunities. And then risk management, the processes the entity uses to identify, assess, prioritize, and monitor sustainability-related risks and opportunities. And then, of course, metrics and targets in terms of the entity's performance in relation to sustainability-related risks and opportunities, including progress towards any targets that the entity itself has set in relation to sustainability-related risks and opportunities, or any targets that may be required under law. Coming to IFRS S2, in terms of the disclosure requirements, the objective for IFRS S2 is to require an entity to disclose information about its climate-related risks and opportunities that is useful to primary users of general purpose financial reports in making decisions relating to providing resources to the entity. And coming to the core content, again, the core content covers the same areas that IFRS S1 talks about. But of course, in this regard, it relates to climate-related risks and opportunities. So for governance, we will be looking at enabling information that enables users of general purpose financial reports to understand the governance processes, controls, and procedures an entity uses to monitor, manage, and oversee climate-related risks and opportunities. Strategy, to enable users of general purpose financial reports to understand an entity's strategy for managing climate-related risks and opportunities. Risk management, to enable users of general purpose financial reports to understand an entity's processes to identify, assess, prioritize, and monitor climate-related risks and opportunities, including whether how these processes are integrated into and inform the entity's overall risk management process. And then metrics and targets, to enable users of general purpose financial reports to understand an entity's performance in relation to its climate-related risks and opportunities, including progress towards any climate-related targets it has set and any targets it is required to meet by law or regulation. And here, that's where we'll be looking at, for instance, what are referred to as the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions requirements. That is what will be included here under metrics and targets. Coming to the supervisory priorities, what are we focusing on? As Zika, currently what we are focusing on is capacity building, because obviously we've noticed that there is definitely a need to do upskilling of both boards of people involved in preparing sustainability reports in organizations, as well as accounting firms as well. We need to upskill them. So we have definitely implemented a system to do capacity building and implementation support on the standards. So we are holding workshops on an annual basis on the standards, on the sustainability standards. We also hold webinars on a regular basis. But also we have partnered with the Pan-African Federation of Accountants and the ESG Exchange in South Africa, who have developed a very useful online tool to provide training on sustainability related issues. And so we have rolled out this training, and currently we have individuals in companies who are implementing sustainability, who are required to implement sustainability reporting, to actually do this training. Initially, the training will be offered on a free basis, but as we go along, of course, we'll start charging for that training, but then we'll roll it out to many, many people, because currently we are only rolling it out to about 50 people to just kind of like do some test basis to see how it's going, to get input, what's their reaction to the training, so that we get feedback, and then the training can then be rolled out to everyone else. We're also focusing on assurance readiness, ensuring that disclosures are verifiable by assessing the control environment, data quality, documentation to prepare for mandatory assurance. In other words, basically just working with people who are required to implement sustainability reporting to ensure that the information that they are providing is ready for assurance, so that assurance reports can be given on that information. And then in terms of the timelines, for IFRS S1 and S2, the first sustainability reports on IFRS S1 and climate-related risks and opportunities are supposed to be done in 2027. As I mentioned earlier, they were supposed to be done to be implemented in 2026 for listed companies, but this has been since moved to 2027 for listed companies. And then for all other organizations, they will be implemented on a voluntary basis. And then comparative information for both comparative information for IFRS S2 will be reported beginning in 2028. This means that usually, if you look at financial statements, they normally have, for instance, if you are reporting on 2025, they'll also have comparative information for 2024. Similarly, IFRS S2 requires that there should be comparative information on climate-related risk and opportunities that should be provided for the previous year. But this will only begin being reported in 2028 because there's a waiver which has been provided in the standards that this should be provided a year after implementation. So which means since we are implementing in 2027, it can only be reported in 2028. And then entities can choose not to disclose information on IFRS S1 in 2027, although that's the date when we're saying we are starting for implementing, but the standard allows for a waiver again for this information to begin being reported a year after the IFRS S2 information has been reported, which is in 2028. And then climate-related disclosures can be issued 9 months after the year end in the first year of reporting, meaning in 2027, information on climate-related risks and opportunities does not necessarily have to be done at the same time when the financial statements are produced. There is a waiver which has been given there that it can be provided 9 months after the first implementation. And then comparative information for IFRS S1 can be reported in 2029 if reporting begins in 2028. Common compliance gaps. Of course, since we have not yet implemented the standards, reporting hasn't yet commenced, so we haven't necessarily picked up standards, gaps which we have noticed. Yeah, but gaps which we may anticipate to be there, for instance, ownership, responsibility for who will be in charge of sustainability disclosures. This may be divided between finance, risk, and operation teams, and this may bring challenges in preparing the sustainability reports, as ownership may not be clearly spelled out. Again, there may be lack of embedded sustainability systems. Organizations may not have sustainability systems embedded in their day-to-day operations, leading to the generation of sustainability reports being a challenge. Then there may be an issue with incomplete Scope 3 emission data, and Scope 3 emissions across the value chain are often estimated rather than calculated through defined methodologies. In other words, the method that may be used for most Scope 3 emission data may be estimation methods rather than direct measurement methods. And then fragmented data systems, you'll find that, sustainability data is collected across multiple business units or spreadsheets without a consistent consolidation process, and consolidating information may prove a challenge to generate reports. Now, of course, although I mentioned that, we have not yet implemented, and we may not necessarily know the exact compliance gaps, we have done a survey with listed companies who are expected to implement sustainability standards. And of course, I haven't stated what we found out there because we don't have like a representative sample right now, which gives us a good indication of which are the main compliance gaps. But I'll just read out some challenges or gaps which have been noticed by some of the organizations. For instance, they have indicated that they have a lack of reliable sustainability data, a lack of expertise at board level, and then difficulty in linking sustainability to business models, not defined processes to assess sustainability risks, and then challenges measuring greenhouse gas emissions. Those are some of the gaps that they have noticed that they think might actually affect the requirement to implement the standards. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Muaba. I think that's very, very impressive and also comprehensive. It is very important to note that the requirements for sustainability disclosure by following the S1 and S2 has been extended for at least 1 year until next year, 2027. And I also see some of the gaps you mapped actually in the presentation, which are very much resonate with many parts elsewhere in the world, including, I think, in China, which I guess many other colleagues and experts in presentation will be presenting. I'm very happy that actually PAFA and many other entities are already helping to do the capacity building and training. I hope today's event and maybe some ongoing events where CASI will be able to contribute can also be counted as some of the efforts to help increase the capacity for sustainability disclosure. We're also very much looking forward to working with local stakeholders here in this regard. So with that, let's move on to our next speaker, focusing on sustainability reporting from capital markets. Let's welcome Nonde Shichilima, who is Director of Market Operations from Securities and Exchange Commission of Zambia. So Mr. Shichilima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you for that warm introduction. And good morning, everybody that's taken time to join us on this quite important topic, not only for Zambia, but for the entire world. And just to say thanks, Mwera, for that presentation. It was very insightful, and I hope that people have been able to take one or two things from that presentation. So Mwera and I do similar work. He looks after the accountants, but I'm coming from the capital markets side of things. So just allow me to put up my presentation, and then we can share our perspectives. Just confirm if you're able to see my presentation.
Not yet. I think it might take a few seconds to come in. Have you already started sharing? I think my colleagues already granted you the authorization to share.
So as we're waiting for the technology to sort itself out, just to emphasize that for us, when we talk about capital markets, the most important thing for us is capital raising. That whatever frameworks we develop actually result in capital being mobilized, and this is channeled into the economic sectors. So whilst we might emphasize the need for reporting frameworks for us to comply with specific standards, at the core of that is investor protection. Does the information that is being presented into these in these financial statements actually help investors make informed decisions, and does it help them achieve their objectives? And in that instance, are they also then protected? So investor protection mandate is quite important for us. Are you able to see my screen now? Can I proceed?
Yes, please. It's coming in already.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So whilst we'll discuss perspectives, I just thought we really emphasize that for us, it's really about generating market transactions from all these frameworks that we're introducing, and making sure that our listed companies, our market players are aligned to the overall global objectives of why we want to have sustainable reporting adopted in Zambia as a jurisdiction. So just for those who may not know about us, we are the Securities and Exchange Commission. We are a baby of Parliament, born in 1993. Our act was replaced and repealed in 2016, just to make sure that we are aligned to the needs of the country, because you can imagine 30 years was quite a long time, so we needed to change something to make sure that we remain relevant. We are affiliated to the International Organization of Securities Commissions. So that's just to make sure that as a jurisdiction, we remain aligned with the best practices globally. And our membership of IOSCO actually helps us to make sure that we are on top of things. So in terms of our views, in terms of sustainability reporting, I think I have alluded to the fact that we want sustainability reporting to be one of the tools that we use to generate activity, to channel capital from investors into the Zambian capital markets. And at the same time, whilst we do that, as a country, we have the agenda to have a green economy. So we really want to make sure that capital markets play their rightful role in that greening of the economy. And hence why we are always aligning everything that we do to the national agendas. So we are quite excited. IFRS S1 and S2 were adopted by the jurisdiction. We wish we could beat countries like Nigeria, who adopted way before the standards were even approved. But at least we do have a national consensus in terms of which standards should apply. And I'm also glad that we've identified as well who are the first companies that have been identified to comply with these standards. And so, and they are in our space. So we're really watching this space to see how best, as from a regulatory point of view, we can help these companies to comply with these standards. I think for us, the other key message is IFRS S1 and S2 are not your typical accounting standards. So it's a mindset shift for a lot of accountants out there, because the standards that have been issued in the past, unfortunately in Zambia, they tend to be thrown to the auditors and the professional firms come up with a solution and then throw it back to the industry and say, here, we've come up with a solution, this is how you report on it. But S1 and S2 literally ask you to introspect on your operations. And trust me, an outsider can only go so far in analyzing your business and identifying the business opportunities and risks that are coming out of the sustainability space. Just as an example, if you're an agricultural company, your auditor doesn't spend days at your farms to see the risks, the impact of the environment on your business and the impact of your business on the environment for them to properly give you that risk and opportunities kind of a spectrum. So it is, for all intents and purposes for us, it is a business case. So if you are having difficulties convincing your board, you have to look at it really as a business opportunity, that it is a survival issue, that you need to adopt S1 and S2 because it impacts how we are going to survive as a company, how we are going to thrive. It will help you build your competitive advantage, whilst at the same time taking care of the environment. So the other part I like about that is the fact that the ISSB standards are meant to be interoperable. So they increase comparability of financial information that's provided to issuers, to users rather. And for us, that's quite important because then we have a mix of international and local investors, and they have to have access to the same kind of information using the same standards that are operating globally without having too much differences and reconciliations having to be done when they come to Zambia. So if you've been following the story about sustainability reporting, it's pretty much investor driven. For us, especially the international investors have really been making demands in terms of what is the jurisdiction doing to adopt sustainability reporting. And we are seeing a little bit of people who are also environmentally aligned, who really want to see that they invest in companies that protect the environment and are looking for sustainable outcomes. So just to emphasize that it's really been investor driven. Yes, regulators do come in, but the current environment is regulators only do things that really promote private sector growth and are good for the economy. So we do not just do regulations because everybody else is doing it. It has to make sense for the jurisdiction. It has to result in capital formation and make it easy for people to do business in the country. So there is also a bit of push from the regulators from that angle, that whatever standards we are adopting are really helping the country. So we are part of the financial sector. So there's three financial sector regulators. Suffice to say that we do speak to each other in a more coordinated way as well through the Green Finance Mainstreaming Working Group. And that includes the three financial sector regulators, including the Institute of Chartered Accountants that I've listed on my slide. But the whole idea is we don't want to be pulling in different directions, because that is quite confusing, firstly, for the target companies, the companies that we want to adopt sustainability reporting, and then also the auditors who are required to provide assurance, and ultimately the investors who are looking for to rely on these sustainability reports. And if we put in different directions, it also means that at the national level, there's something that will definitely go wrong in terms of the direction that the country is taking. So that's the ecosystem for the regulators, and it's supplemented heavily by the work that we are doing under the Green Finance Mainstreaming Working Group. So I think Mora did speak extensively on the role of regulators. Our role really has transitioned from just lawmaking and compliance-based regimes, tick box exercise and sanctioning people for not complying with certain things. We now look at having enabling frameworks for business to thrive, and whilst we are helping the government achieve their objectives. So what you tend to see is we do a lot of work in terms of establishing frameworks, And then we take a sit back and say, are these frameworks enough? Do they enable business to thrive, or should we be doing more from a regulatory point of view? So similar to Mwelwa's, we'll also be asking for feedback from the market to see what are the challenges and what can we do about it, because the whole idea is to get solutions. So market support and capacity building are very key for us, because what we want to see is adoption of these standards, and the other metrics for us is we literally are able to point to a key economic indicator and say, that's because we've got the frameworks in place and we've done something right. That's why the country is moving in a particular direction. So like I said, it's not your typical accounting standards when we talk about sustainability reporting, even assurance reports. I think we are actually asking a lot more from the professionals that work in these fields. So, like I said, for us, sustainability reporting links into various projects, and we have an objective to develop alternative funding instruments through the capital markets. And inevitably, these instruments are issued by market players out there, and investors subscribe to these products. So we believe that all these frameworks help us to achieve those broad agendas of growing the capital markets, increasing the number of products that are available to investors and issuers alike. So we really focus on how relevant are these standards to the achievement of these broader agenda items. Similar to Zika, we've also taken a sit back and said, how ready are the listed companies as the starting group to implement these standards? So we are also keenly waiting, Mwelwa, to see the results of that readiness survey that Zika is doing, because we want to also see what we can do from a capital markets point of view to encourage our registrants to adopt sustainability reporting and also undertake additional capacity building initiatives. I'm glad CASI have already come on board to support us in that journey. But if we need tailored and so on, that's something that we are really keen on in terms of making sure that Zambia adopts sustainability reporting and it makes sense for them. So there is some good news on the horizon, and we're always encouraged if we have some first movers within the market, because it helps to signal to everybody else, and especially our international and local investors, that look, what we are talking about is something that we as Zambians have already started doing. So we do have some first movers. CEC PLC have already issued sustainability reports. CEC Renewables, they issued a $200 million green bond. So they've also issued a sustainability report. Zambia as well have also done it. So I'm not marketing these, but just to demonstrate that the things that we are talking about today are actually doable. And we've got folks in Zambia that have already started doing these reports. And what it also does is it provides an opportunity for peer learning. So if there's anyone on the call today and they're wondering where are some of the places that they can get some of the information, I think there are peers within your industry that have already started doing these things. And it would be good to link up and see what lessons can be learned. So some of the things that, in terms of our approach generally okay. So I just wanted to do a time check. How much time do I have before I wrap up?
It's almost already the time.
Okay, all right, then I'll wrap up, because I think I've pretty much made the point. So for us, what would be key in terms of developing a roadmap is to really understand the gaps that we have. So the survey that Zika is doing, we'll also do another internal one across the capital markets to really understand the gaps that we have. And then we'll hopefully form an implementation plan that will run into medium to long term, so that we give the market a chance to do this properly. And we are picking from our experiences in implementing a similar approach for internal controls over financial reporting, where we sort of had a 5-year transition period, and it allowed the market to really catch up. And we now have almost 90% compliance with our internal controls over financial reporting. So going forward, because internal controls are quite important, I've seen that we have the assurance reporting standard that's been issued. And believe you me, once the auditors come on board, the sustainability reports are going to change drastically, because everyone wants to avoid a qualified report, and auditors tend to rely on internal controls. So the good news is, for those companies that have strong ICOFO frameworks, you've done 90% of the work, and you merely need to tweak that to adopt to sustainable reporting. So as we emphasize voluntary adoption by listed companies, we really hope that this will extend beyond the listed companies. Our market cap to GDP ratio will show you that we are seated below, just close to 50%. So our concern as a capital markets is we want 100% of our GDP to be adopting sustainability reporting, because then it represents the economy fairly well. So we hope that that will also be resolved as we go forward. With those few remarks, I think I can close my presentation here, except to encourage ourselves that this is doable. It's good for the country. It's not merely a compliance issue. It's the new way of doing business. If you recall, we had a very serious drought a few years ago, and a lot of us in this room actually realized that it's real. And as companies, as people that are in charge of companies, we needed to make sure that our companies are ready for that kind of a scenario. I thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chichilima. I think that's a very concise and also clear enough for us. I heard actually quite a lot of information from your part. In addition to regulatory expectations, I also heard what the investors in the market are looking for, and also how the market readiness will be looking like for now, especially among the listed companies. Some of them, mostly, I think they're not even, and in many parts of the world, it's almost the same. We're also very much looking forward to the survey results, if it can be made public in the future, on how and what would be the key results and findings. So I also agree with you that the internal control would be key for making sure the transparency disclosure by following the standards would be important, and also make sure all the stakeholders in the entity, especially those preparers, are involved. So with that, thank you once again, Mr. Please, on day. So please stay with us until I think later we will have a Q&A session. And after that, I think we will do a group photo after all the 3 or 4 presentations are finished. So now please allow me to actually do a presentation focusing on the experiences and lessons from other emerging markets and developing economies. Let me see. Yes, I do have the share button. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. I'll be very quick. Make sure actually it won't be eating up too much time. My slides, sorry. I'll have like 3 or 4 different parts for these slides. Basically, it's focusing on the other markets developments. Globally, I think we know where the ISSB is coming from. It actually has been working very closely with many other standards and also frameworks, including the GRI, ISRS, and CDP, BCBS, and so on. And then we have comparability among different standards. And then we have the ISSB standards, IFRS S1 and S2. It's also based on the TCFD recommendations of 4 pillars and so on, and has a lot of connections with the current and also the financial reports. So we also heard a lot about assurability. This is, I think, a key difference from previous voluntary-based sustainability disclosure. We also heard from the regulator, DACA, how they are looking forward to the assurance as part of the report and efforts in the future. And based on what we found on the ISSB website, we see that globally there are already more than 37 jurisdictions who claimed or have formally adopted the ISSB standards. Many of them are actually at different stages of spreading across the world. That's quite a lot of growth. And let's just maybe give a very quick overview what's the other parts of the world, including maybe Hong Kong, SAR, China mainland, and also ASEAN, and maybe some cases from even South America. So Hong Kong actually is one of the pioneering sustainability disclosure financial centers in the world. And they started as early as 2012 and then all the way to 2023. They also announced the sustainability disclosure as a mandatory disclosure starting from this year. So you will see a group of financial institutions and non-financial listed companies are going to issue the first reports in the next few weeks. It's going to be, I think, first of the few in the world as well. And then in China mainland, we also see actually different requirements, including those from the security exchanges, including Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing, and also from the Ministry of Finance. From the three stock exchanges, they are mainly asking first, I think the composite index composite companies to start disclosing is mandatory. While in Shanghai and Beijing, Shanghai and Shenzhen is mandatory. For Beijing Stock Exchange is voluntary for now. And in total, I think slightly more than 450 enterprises are covered in the first batch. And I heard like more than 90% of them have already disclosed by early last year. And the results looked good, at least comparatively before the TCFD days. These requirements are also following the TCFD framework, although they are not aligned, not 100% aligned with the ISSB standards and covering many different topics, including ESG, and actually not only about the climate, but also on nature, biodiversity, water, pollutants, and so on. And talking about the climate, China Ministry of Finance is specifically working on the corporate sustainability disclosure frameworks, and it's aligned with the ISSB standards as well, including a phased approach. So by 2030, the National Unified Sustainability Disclosure Frameworks will be working. And then in addition to Hong Kong, China mainland, there's also quite a few other entities, especially, for example, here in Malaysia. The regulator not only asking them to disclose, but also have developed a guide for the boards. The listed issuers on both Malaysia's main and ACE markets actually are asked to comply with the new reporting requirements. And they have developed a question-based, more like a step-by-step approach to ask the companies, especially the board members, to understand what the requirements are looking like and what they shall be doing. For example, there are questions like, does your sustainability data have the same boundary as financial reporting? Or has the company assessed the financial impact of sustainability and climate risks and opportunities and so on? By designing the questions and answering the questions, these guidance will be helping the boards to go through the standards and also help prepare for the sustainability reporting. And also they have very clear boundary, including the reporting boundary and also what's the difference between the financial reporting entity. For example, what is the relationship between the parent, joint arrangements, the subsidiaries, investments, and also the whole value chain when they're doing their own sustainability reporting. And when assessing the financial impact of sustainability-related risks and opportunities, which is also, I think, talked about in previous two slides, they are also asking questions like, what is the risk over the short, medium, and long term? Also, you have to explain what is the short, medium, and long term, and also what are the opportunities over the same period of time. And this is the iterative process. That means you can ask questions on and on. And then when integrating sustainability risk and opportunities into their own ERM system, there are also key questions like, what is the extent of sustainability and climate risks being included in the existing risk registry, and are identified risk opportunities aligned with strategic priorities, or so on. So there are quite a lot of different questions on the risk management. And also there are metrics related, including, for example, on S1, it's more the quantitative, for example, recommend considering the applicable metrics from SASB standards, metrics the entity uses to measure and monitor the SRRO and also its performance. On S2, it's more like S1 as GHG emissions on Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, and also capital deployment, value or percentage of asset or business under vulnerable to the climate change and so on, and also internal carbon prices, remuneration, and so on. So they are providing a very clear guidance to the boards to prepare their sustainability reporting. And then let's go to very quick, I think, some case studies starting from Valley from Brazil. This is one of the largest mining companies, iron ore. They published its inaugural sustainability-related financial information report in 2024. In addition to following the 4 pillars like governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets, this report is constantly translating sustainability into decision useful and also financially relevant and forward-looking information. This is why we also like it very much. The report is not very long. It's in total, I think, around like 50 pages. And taking off some other things, I think the climate-related information is only like around 40 pages. But actually, it's providing very, very key information that's related to the operations. For example, here are some, I think, information that are very important from our readers' point of view. From governance point of view, they have embedded already the governance-related issues into decision-making. And for example, on the right, you can see some of the measures and disclosed information shows that the integration across governance layers, different layers of them. And the second thing is that they integrate sustainability into strategy and risk oversight process. So they provide evidence of formalized and recurring governance engagement and so on. In terms of financial materiality, they also are showing how the climate risks can be transforming into financial impacts. They also are deploying or applying a matrix to making analysis on these risks. They provided a support, let's say, points like the impact can be to the whole valuation of the enterprises, including links to risks. Links risks to specific operations business segments, describes the impact on cost structures, assets, or performance, and also moves from narrative to financially relevant insights. And in terms of the risk, especially scenario analysis, they are using this approach to drive their own strategic resilience to climate change. For example, they use externally recognized scenarios, SSPs, and links scenarios to business exposure and decision-making. You can see on the right, there's transition risk 1, 2, 3, and also opportunities 1, 2, from low to medium to high and so on, and also have different scale of the time. Shows a variation of outcomes and across scenarios. And I think there is another important element under the ISSB standards, which is about the proportionality. That is about the right size and also impact to the operations of the entity. That's also reflected in the calibration of its disclosure depth. The report demonstrates the proportionality by calibrating the level of detail across topics based on their materiality and complexity. For example, they provided more granular and technical disclosure in high-risk areas, or maintains concise and focused disclosure in less material areas, and also shows selective use of advanced methodologies rather than applying complexity uniformly. And there are also a few other cases, including some financial institutions from China. And here, making example of these big 5, big 6, maybe financial institutions from China. Since in mainland China, they are not mandatorily asked to disclose by following the ISSB standards yet. All of them are almost using the TCFD framework. Some of them are dual listed, including Hong Kong Exchange and also A-shares. So some of them will be very soon disclosing their first sustainability report in the next few weeks as well. But for now, I think there are some information that's already made available, including from the 4 pillars like governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets on how well they're playing. And here are some circles. So the shaded ones are how well they have performed, while the blank areas, meaning they're not very well performing. So you can see actually they are overall doing great in terms of governance, and I cannot say great, but better. And as we go from governance to strategy to risk management and to metrics and targets, actually the performance can be visibly reducing over the different topics. On governance, there are some banks, for example, Bank of Communications, they have established a bottom-up ESG management system with clearly defined responsibilities. While strategy, there is also China's Construction Bank doing good on 3 strategic pillars, including green finance management, comprehensive risk management, and also carbon footprint management. And risk management is ICBC, who is leading among the big 6. Well, for metrics and targets, so the Bank of China, Hong Kong actually is doing great. They are among the first big banks in China doing Scope 3 accounting for all the assets. Here are some also glimpses of these banks, how well they're performing, but due to time constraint, I don't have to go through very very quickly. These just examples of how well they are performing. So last part is about really recommendations and challenges that we have seen. So as you can see, not all of them are doing equally well. As we can see also from the presentation earlier, they are not equally ready, and some of them actually are doing well, some of them not that well, and so on. And the awareness are growing among the different preparers and among different regions, although the efforts may need support and better support. And second thing is there are, I think, broadly a lack of tools and professional capabilities for scenario analysis, climate risk stress testing, and also the judgment on materiality as well as in proportionality. At levels of supply chain carbon accounting, they actually face challenges in methods, data, and capacity. So earlier, I think I heard also from the presentation saying the lack of capacity to use the tools to do carbon accounting, including collecting data, is still there. So from the strategy for implementation of disclosure standards, I think we need to gradually move from listed to non-listed, from large enterprises to smaller ones, from monetary to, I think, semi-monetary and mandatory, from qualitative to quantitative, defining a clear timeline and also enhancing capacity building. So as a capacity building alliance for sustainable investment, CASI would be very happy to provide the support that we have, and also by bringing together the resources we have, as well as the resources our members have. And in the case of Zambia and today's webinar, we will be very happy to follow up with requests from local stakeholders, including the listed companies. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and thank you very much for that. I probably will be holding some of the the time for a Q&A at a later stage after our next presentation. So let me invite Kukeso Modise, who is Senior Market Risk and Analyst from South Africa Reserve Bank, the central bank in South Africa, to share the practical sustainability disclosure from South Africa's point of view. Ms. Modise,
thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great.
Shantessa's going to provide the presentation for me. Thank you so much. Okay. You can just move to the agenda, please. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'll just be giving an overview of what our approach has been, as well as what we've observed in terms of our financial institutions with regard to the standards, and also just give a broad overview of the Adoption Readiness Working Group at a later stage, and then what we are looking at doing going ahead. Next slide, please. So on climate disclosure guidance, so what we did was we provided 4 guidances, so 2 guidance notes for banks and 2 for insurers. So the one was on disclosures, climate-related disclosures, and the other one was on governance and risk practices. And again, we considered both banks and insurers. So we published these guidances for comments in August of 2023. And then between September and October 2023, we then went out for an industry consultation, and we received 45 written submissions from 28 entities. And then in November of 2023, between November 2023 and January 2024, we updated the guidance notices to incorporate the comments that we had received from industry. And then for February of 2024, we had a stakeholder consultation with some of our stakeholders. And then March 2024, we went through our own internal governance processes in order to get the guidances approved for publishing. And we also had an industry engagement. And then we then published the final guidance notes in May of 2024. And then last year in October, what we did was we embarked on an exercise to align the disclosure to the disclosure guidances with the BCBS on the banking side. So the BCBS released their consultation paper in November, which was initially meant to be finalized in the first half of 2024, but due to the winds from the west, it was delayed, and then they eventually then published in June of 2025. On the IIS side, so on the insurance side, they also undertook a broader consultation and then published an application paper in April of 2025. So then we went back and we updated our guidance notices in order to reflect what the BCBS had done. So we just included some quantitative templates that basically allow institutions to report for physical and transition risks. And the Basel Committee had initially proposed for the first two templates to be mandatory and then the last two to be voluntary. But given, again, the pushback from the West, they kept it as voluntary, and then we followed suit as well. So we've kept our guidance voluntary, and we've included these templates as annexures to our guidance on the website. Next slide, please. So in terms of the disclosure, the approach that we followed, so what we did was we took a principle-based, globally aligned approach in informing our climate disclosure guidelines. So for banks, we explicitly aligned to IFRS S2 as we recognize that this is the emerging global baseline for climate disclosures. And the guidance is also built on the TCFD climate-related financial disclosures structure, which underpins IFRS S2 as well. And this approach was widely supported by industry. So we had a lot of unanimous support to align with the ISSB standards. And for insurers, the approach that has been anchored in TCFD and IS guidance, reflecting the specific nature of insurance risks and the need for the proportionate transition. And then overall, the PA has really taken, or we take a globally aligned, pragmatic approach to climate related disclosures. And the overall objective is just to ensure that there's alignment with international standards while still allowing for sector specific application and practical implementation as well. Next slide, please, Shantesa. Thank you. So we embarked on a review project within the Prudential Authority in order to assess how our financial institutions that we regulate are applying the guidance that we published. And I thought I'd just give an overview of what the observations have been. I think it's important to note that with the specific metrics that I'll go through, that these observations are very consistent between the banks and insurers, given that they are aligned to common disclosure frameworks. However, there are some sector-specific nuances, particularly for the insurance industry, which I'll highlight at a later stage. But generally, across both banks and insurers, there are some clear areas of progress. So institutions are generally demonstrating awareness of climate-related risks and have established governance structures to oversee these risks. However, there are a number of gaps that still remain with the disclosures. And the disclosures, from what we've observed, are very high level and qualitative in nature, with limited link to financial impact or decision making. And there's also very limited use of the quantitative metrics, and hopefully with now us attaching these templates to the guidance, that will push that a little bit more. So there's limited use of quantitative metrics, and scenario analysis also kind of remains underdeveloped. But overall, while the awareness is quite strong, the getting it into operationalizing it remains quite limited. Next slide, please, Shantesa. So on the governance side, the area of governance, most institutions have aligned to our guidance in terms of the governance, and they've assigned the responsibility of climate-related risks to the board and some management as well. So climate oversight is often embedded within existing governance structures, such as risk or sustainability committees. However, the disclosure here provides very limited evidence of how these structures operate in practice. In particular, there's very little visibility on the level of board engagement that's going on within the institutions. There's very little evidence on challenge or influence, again, on decision making. And so what this suggested to us is that while the structures are actually put in place and they're looking at climate, the effectiveness is not clearly demonstrated as yet. So there's still room for improvement there as well. Next slide, please. On the strategy, institutions identify both physical and transition risks, and in some cases, climate-related opportunities as well. However, the link between these risks and actual strategic decisions is often weak in terms of the disclosures. There's also limited evidence of how climate considerations are influencing business models or financial planning. So some institutions refer to scenario analysis, but disclosures lack detail on assumptions and the methodologies that are used and how the results are used as well. So again, this just suggests that climate risk is acknowledged once again, but not yet fully driving strategic decision making. Next slide, please. On the risk management side, climate risks are increasingly being incorporated into existing risk management frameworks. However, integration into the core processes still remains quite limited. Disclosures are, again, often qualitative with little evidence of how climate risk is affecting appetite or how it's influencing limits and controls. There's also very limited transparency on the methodologies that are actually used to assess and monitor these risks, which indicates to us that while the risks are recognized, they're not fully embedded into the day-to-day risk management processes. Next slide, please. On the last one, which is metrics and targets, some institutions disclose emissions or emission-related metrics on sustainability indicators. However, there is limited consistency and comparability across the institutions. So targets where they are disclosed are often very high level and lack detail on scope, on timelines, and on implementation as well. There is also very weak alignment between metrics, targets, and a broader strategy or risk management processes, as mentioned. And as a result, disclosures are not fully sufficient to allow them to be decision useful. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier on, I wanted to highlight some specific nuances observed from the insurance sector. So overall, insurers appear to be at an early stage of maturity in their disclosures as in comparison to banks. And while disclosures are broadly aligned to common frameworks, there is still some variability across insurers in terms of the depth and consistency and the quality of the disclosures. In terms of the key observations, so there's more prominent discussions of extreme weather events and catastrophe risks, reflecting the sector's direct exposure to physical risks. And then insurers are also increasingly recognizing the implications of these risks when it comes to claim pricing and overall risk exposure. However, the disclosures remain largely qualitative once again, with limited quantification and limited assessment of the financial impacts. And then differences are also evident across the business models. So non-life insurers generally show more stronger disclosures, particularly in relation to physical risks, while life insurers tend to have less developed disclosures, reflecting more indirect risk exposure to physical risks. So yeah, despite all of this progress that they have made, there are some key gaps that remain with regard to the insurers as well. But overall, I think it highlights that while the awareness is improving, there's still significant scope to strengthen the depth, the consistency, and decision usefulness, once again, of the insurance disclosures. Next slide, please. So in terms of the alignment with the standards, when assessed against the international standards, as I've mentioned, so we've gone with S2 for now. Both banks and insurers disclosures show partial alignment with TCFD, and banks show early and stronger alignment with regard to the ISSB S2 standards. However, the key gaps that still remain, again, is there's limited provision to quantitative decision, useful information, scenario analysis, and the disclosures really lack depth. They also is limited integration of these into financial planning and reporting. But overall, this really indicates that disclosures are not fully aligned with global standards as yet, and that there's still a lot of room for improvement with regard to what we're observing in terms of disclosures for our financial institutions. Next slide, please. What our key lessons from this has been is that there is need to move beyond disclosures as a compliance sort of exercise and move more towards meaningful integration of these climate risks into risk management and decision making. And supervisory focus will need to strengthen in areas such as scenario analysis, metrics and targets, and integration into capital risk frameworks. And there's also a need to guard against risks such as greenwashing, and inconsistent disclosures as well. So ultimately, disclosures should really support effective supervision for us, which is really important, and not just reporting. And then lastly, I think this analysis also highlights and reinforces the need for proportionate implementation of the disclosure standards, reflecting differences in the institutions or different institution sizes, the capacity, and the sector-specific profile. Which sometimes we take into account, and we will take into account going forward, especially because we intend to mandate the disclosures at some point. Next slide, please. On the broader sustainability reporting adoption, so we have a working group that has been brought together, which brings together regulators, standard setters, and industry participants in order to support a coordinated and consistent approach towards adoption of sustainability standards. So the key purpose here is to really support understanding and interpretation of the standards, identify implementation challenges, and promote knowledge sharing across the jurisdictions and across the industry here in South Africa, as well as develop a roadmap towards adoption and also really come to consensus on specific issues. So there is a huge recognition of the complexities with regard to the standards and actually adopting the standards, which include the regulatory fragmentation between the different institutions, data, expertise, and reporting capabilities, etc. So this working group will deal with these nuances and address these issues, which include proportionality, sector-specific challenges, and interoperability within the existing frameworks. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking ahead, we expect increased adoption of the ISSB standards across jurisdictions, and we're seeing that quite evidently. And there'll also be a growing focus on nature-related risks and broader environmental risk landscape as well. And then expectations will continue to evolve towards greater quantification, improved data, and clearer articulation of financial impacts. And institutions from our side will need to strengthen both capabilities and systems to meet these expectations as well. And again, as mentioned throughout our presentations, there's also a very huge focus on capacity building and industry engagement. I'm going to hand over to Shantesa to see if she wants to add anything, but that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Nothing from my side, but happy to come in the Q&A round.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Modise, and also Shinsesa for your presentation. I very much actually was impressed by the observations seen as a regulator, and also very much looking forward to see how other maybe regulators can also learn from the establishment of adoption readiness working group, which was also some kind of key maybe success or elements that can be done for maybe implementing such sustainability disclosure standards. The help and the support that the preparers will need can be, I think, more readily provided through such working groups. They can not only learn better from the regulation expectation, the explanation of the standards, and also they can learn from, as Didi, thank you so much, the peer learning. This is very, very helpful and useful. So that's actually the last presentation for the first stage. Before moving to our panel discussion, shall I actually invite everyone, try to turn on your camera. We want to take a virtual group photo, and our colleagues from the CASI Secretariat will do a screenshot of everyone. So I would encourage everyone, please try to turn on your camera for at least 30 seconds, and we will do a screening, and then I think we'll send that to every one of you as a evidence and maybe a beautiful memory in the future. It says, I like your background so much. So for those everyone, please, if you do want to take a photo, join us, turn on your camera. Yeah, I see people are still trying. So let's give them a few more seconds. Nihui, please do give me a signal once the screenshot is done.
Yes,
It's done. Okay.
No,
Great.
no. Wait
Thank
a moment.
Not
Just
yet?
a moment.
Okay.
Just a
Okay.
moment.
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Wait a moment. 3, 2, 1, cheers.
Let's smile to the screen.
Okay. One more. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay.
Great.
We got it. Okay.
Great. Yes, please. We are still encouraged to keep your videos on.
You're on mute. Cheng, you have muted your mic. Unmute your mic.
Sorry for that. I think someone just muted everyone. So before moving on to our panel discussion, shall we just wait for maybe 1 or 2 minutes and see if there is any immediate question based on to the presentations we just saw in early parts of this event? Please feel free to raise your question either in the chat or maybe raise your hand by using the function on the Teams app. Let's give them maybe 5 to 10 seconds to raise the hand. I see 1 hand, 2 hands. Yeah, so maybe let me give the floor to Chuta Chungu first.
Good morning. Maybe
Morning.
for organizing this session. What a brilliant discussion presentation so far. Really grateful for the opportunity to attend. And I also want to sort of commend the journey that Zambia is making towards S1 and S2 reporting. Clearly, it's an investor-driven conversation. But I think I'm curious to learn what some of the other jurisdictions have done in the wake of, coming from an emerging market context. For Zambia, for example, we're very heavily reliant on our industries to drive our economy. And so the context of a double materiality lens becomes quite important for Zambia. So I really just want to understand, maybe giving a context of where, S1 and S2 has been adopted elsewhere, what that journey typically has been like within the companies that you've looked at in terms of also adopting a double materiality lens. So also looking at the impact that companies are having on the environment, on society, etc. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chuta Chungu. I realize actually you're also one of the CASI online learning program enrollments. Thank you very
That's
much
right.
for that question. Yes, great. Thank you very much. Since you're asking about the double materiality and also for cases from outside of Zambia, let me see if, let's say, Ms. Modese, you have any response to that? For example, is the South Africa Central Bank or maybe sustainability disclosure requirements also covering double materiality, or is single materiality?
So we intend to cover double materiality going forward. So that is a big consideration for us.
Okay, great. Well, maybe just also adding on that point, China Ministry of Finance is actually developing and implementing the China version of the corporate sustainability disclosure, and it has elements of double materiality as well. Although the more like materiality on how the operations of the corporates or preparers might have impact on the external, including environmental, social, and the ecology and the environment, would be, I think, less in terms of quantitative. Currently, we are seeing some kind of guidance coming out. Let me see if there is any response from other two speakers earlier. Anyone else who want to take that? If not, let me just move on to our second question. Oh, this is very long. So if I read your name not right, please just forgive me. Illustrious.
I think you did very well. Am I audible?
Thank you very much. Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and brilliant presentations from everyone in the morning. Quite a lot of learnings, and most grateful as well for the practical examples given, and also the last presentation in terms of what the South African market has actually done and the approach that it's taken. From a Zambian perspective, I think one of the fundamental challenges that we have is around the data availability, which is something that I believe is common across most jurisdictions. Specifically with respect to IFRS S2, the disclosures around Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions, and Scope 3. In the previous slides, you did indicate that some of the jurisdictions that have adopted these sustainability standards to a larger extent have not yet fully complied with the Scope 3 disclosure requirements. We are fortunate that we have our regulator here, both SEC and ZICA. In terms of Scope 3 disclosure requirements, would you probably recommend that for a country such as Zambia, where we have not specifically given an exemption on Scope 3 emissions, that probably we should consider to stagger the requirements around what is expected in the first year of disclosure and probably allow the market to mature in order for us to be able to disclose, for instance, Scope 3. As it stands right now, there hasn't been any explicit exemptions, as far as I'm aware, around the disclosures. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So since you are directing these questions to Ms. Modise, let me try to recap what you were trying to ask. It's about the Scope 3 disclosure. Since Zambia regulator is not excluding the requirements on Scope 3 disclosure, your question would be from, let's say, South Africa's point of view, what would you be your recommendations for preparers on Scope 3, right?
Precisely.
Yes, Ms. Modise. Yeah, great. What is your recommendation?
Okay, so I think, again, the approach that we have taken as a prudential authority in terms of our guidance and recommendation is basically as a proportionate and staggered approach. So I think the question or the topic of proportionality is quite important. So I guess speaking in terms of what we've done, I don't want to speak and quote anything, but in terms of what we've done, we definitely consider proportionality in terms of implementation with implementing all our regulations. And with the Prudential Authority, so we've got a very specific mandate, right? So it's the safety and soundness of financial institutions. We do regulate financial institution. So with scope 3, this is quite important for financial institutions specifically because it represents the bulk of their climate exposures. So it is important that they do disclose scope 3 emissions. But again, you need to take proportionality and the size of the institutions into account and maybe sort of try and implement it on a sort of more staggered approach over the years, and that it's not going to be like a blanket sort of application for all the institutions. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutese. That's a very good, I think, explanation. Proportionality is very much, I think, relates to the disclosure of scope 3. Just also from my point of view, actually, what I observed from Hong Kong stock exchanges, they are also developing like a phased and also, I think, tiered approach for scope 3 disclosure in terms of timing and also the size of the company. And the size of company actually is kind of consideration of proportionality. So I hope actually this can answer maybe your question and maybe also helpful for the preparers in Zambia to prepare their own sustainability disclosure reports in the future. So since there is no more hands up, let's maybe move on to our next.
Can I just add something to that question?
Sure, please.
Yeah, for me, I think I take note of the comment, and it's a very useful comment for us as regulators, both SEC and ZICA. And what I would say is that this is why, for instance, I would maybe like to urge all listed companies who are on this call to respond to that survey, which we have done jointly with SEC, to be able to give us response in terms of some of these challenges that are being faced. Because if, for instance, there's a recommendation that implementation of scope 3 emissions reports should be staggered because of the challenges of data. These are some of the things that can be highlighted in that survey, which has been done, and it would be very helpful because then we'll be able to possibly consider even staggering implementation for that.
Thanks for the addition from Mr. Mwaba. Any other comments or a follow-up?
For me, I think
Yes.
I just wanted to, so I think I did allude to it in my presentation. When it comes to the implementation of these standards, the regulators are taking a market approach. So we listen to the market and find out what works best for you. So the issue of data has been raised, I think, even in December when we were launching our green taxonomy. The issue of data was really on everyone's lips, like, okay, you've launched the taxonomy, but where's the data that's going to help me adopt this taxonomy going to come from? And it's not just about the data, its availability, the value of that data. So who validates this data so that by the time I'm reporting using the taxonomy or issuing a sustainability report using a specific set of data, I'll not be accused of greenwashing and all these things that investors are inevitably are going to face. So my challenge to the market is let's keep the conversation lines open. Do not wait until your submission is due and then that's when you turn around and say, oh, we have this challenge. Let's start talking right now to say we have a challenge with this. And this is what we intend to do. And lastly, for me, what is important from a capital markets perspective is disclosure. So you're not going to be penalized for not being able to report. But what you inevitably end up being penalized for is for not making adequate disclosures to your investors and they suffer harm. So it's proportionality throughout. We are listening as regulators. We want solutions because remember I talked about mobilizing capital for the country. So to the extent that data is an issue, then it means that we have to listen and come up with solutions together with the industry. I just thought I'd add that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Shishilima. I also see 2 hands up. Let me maybe invite Ms. Modeste to make the invitation first.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to go back to the very first question on double materiality. I just want to qualify it. So I think with the issue of double materiality, it really, again, when I'm speaking from a South African Reserve Bank perspective and the Prudential Authority in particular, our mandate is very specific, right? So it's the safety and soundness of financial institutions, once again, so we regulate financial institutions. So that's quite specific. So in terms of what we consider from a materiality perspective, we would really kind of look at financial materiality. But what I meant in terms of how we consider the double materiality, I think in terms of our jurisdiction as a whole, double materiality would obviously then be important and be considered. Again, I sit on the Adoption Readiness Working Group, and this is something that is discussed at that level. So I think it would really depend on who or which side of the sort of corporates and companies that it would apply to. But from a Prudential Authority perspective, when we issued our guidance, because our mandate is very specific, we didn't necessarily consider double materiality because, yeah, again, of our mandate. So I just wanted to qualify what the response that I gave earlier on. Thanks.
Yeah, great. No problem, Modise. Thank you so much. Let me go back to maybe Elu's areas and see if that actually answers your question earlier, including, I think, the open of conversation like the opportunities today.
Thank you. Certainly, I think my earlier question has been adequately addressed, and thank you so much for the insights from both our local regulator and also the additional clarification that came through. I just want to take advantage of this opportunity because we are learning from others who have gone before us. Just wanted to leverage off the lessons learned from the Adoption Readiness Working Group in South Africa. One of the key themes that is emanating through the adoption of these standards is assurance. Like you highlighted, greenwashing, etc. In Zambia, for listed entities, for instance, we have adopted an internal control framework where we attest and report to our regulator SEC on an annual basis in terms of the adequacy and effectiveness of our controls. And through that framework, we are able to demonstrate to the market how compliant we are. But we've seen, obviously, the evolution and the new standards coming through, such as your assurance standards, which the external auditors will be required to give an opinion. Now, looking at the South African market, and also, Chenli, I can also get your comments on this. To what extent have you evolved to require the external auditors to start giving a view or an opinion on the adequacy of disclosures, but particularly with a focus on the maturity where we are? Should that conversation start now, or probably we allow the market to mature and ultimately then get to that phase where we are audited? And my last comment would also be around costs. The adoption of these sustainability standards comes with quite a substantial investment, a worthwhile investment. How are you navigating that particular aspect to support entities to freely adopt, but at the same time within a reasonable cost? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that's bringing more and more to actually the challenging questions. I see. Oh, okay. I see Didi also had a hand up, but considering the time constraints, maybe let's just move on to our next session on the panel discussion. Oh, and Didi, you still want to respond to that question on auditors and assurance?
You know, I was gonna respond to the earlier ones, but I can weave that into my response. And I think this question was to Koki, and I think it was a very important question. So yes. I just wanted to pull back. I'll try and address some of the questions during the panel, just to save time.
Okay, great, thanks. Shinsesa, you want to save your question later, or you want to do now?
It's not a question, it's just a quick note. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to the Prudential Authority guidance notices that Koketso has mentioned throughout her presentation in the chat box. And for the question that just came up on assurance requirements, there's information there in terms of like roles and responsibilities. And then I think that should be more helpful in answering that question more directly.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much on double neutrality. Great. So now let's move on to our panel discussion, and we're already like a few minutes late. So after I think the presentations and also already quite a few rounds of discussions, let's move on. And I'd like to invite Mr. Peter Duffy, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the ESG Exchange, to moderate the forthcoming panel discussion focusing on bridging the sustainability capacity gaps in Zambia. And now, Mr. Peter, the floor is yours. Mr. Peter, are you still there? You're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me okay, Chen-Ling?
Yes, great.
Perfect, okay.
Thank you.
So everybody, delighted to have been invited to support the ESG Exchange. Delighted to be supporting CASI and the Zambian SEC here on this really fantastic, riveting webinar this morning. So we have, I'm not so sure, Chen-Ling, if we're going to go to the full hour and the additional 10 minutes Q&A given the time overrun. I'll await your guidance as we progress through. I'll await your guidance on that. So we have 3 rock stars in terms of panelists that are significant authorities internationally and nationally on the topics. We have prepared some questions, but before we start, I would like to invite each of our panelists, NG from ISSB, Batala from CEC, and Merwa from Zika, maybe to your cameras if you can, if you have bandwidth there. Good connectivity and so forth. And I'm just going to invite each person first to give just a 2-minute introduction of themselves so that then you'll have the context for the answers to the questions that they're going to provide to me in the course of our panel discussion. So ladies first, and Didi, I'm going to invite you first to just do everybody knows you of course, but just a very brief intro in the context of this webinar this morning.
No, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege. Honestly, it's so powerful to listen to the work that we're doing in practice. My brain is buzzing with all kinds of things. I think 2 minutes is long to introduce myself. My name is Ndidi, Dr. Ndidi Noli-Adozian. I sit on the ISSB. I represent Africa on the board. If I was going to say anything else, I would start answering the questions. So up to you. Do I start answering some of the questions that were asked before, or I'll just pass it over?
No, wait. Yeah, I invite Batala now to Batala, if you could put on your camera perhaps and just do a very brief introduction to yourself and your role in CEC.
Okay, thanks, Pada, and good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. I represent CEC. I look after the finance department of CEC. I'm quite excited to be here. I think from a corporate perspective, we are happy that Zambia is moving this way, and we see ourselves as being at the intersection of the infrastructure delivery from an energy perspective that is required and will require a lot of financing, most of which will flow as a result of the topics that we're talking about. And on the other hand, we've got investors' expectations. And then lastly, we've got the regulators, Zika and SEC. So it's quite good that we are here and we'll try and lead to the extent possible as a business. Thank you.
Thank you, Batala. Merwa, we spoke earlier on this morning. Maybe you would like, I know people have heard you speak before, but just to reintroduce yourself here, give a brief overview or profile of yourself and Zika.
Thank you very much, Peter. Grateful for the opportunity to be on this panel. My name is Mwelwa Mwaba. I'm Director Standards and Regulation at the Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants. So I oversee the work to do with implementation of the sustainability standards in Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Melwa. I should also introduce myself and the ESG Exchange. Many of you, I'm sure, will have heard about the ESG Exchange. We are an NGO, non-governmental organization, and we were created 3 years ago, when Carolyn Chalmers and Professor Mervyn King and myself came together to have a conversation about the forthcoming standards, the standards that have arrived here today. And we recognize one very big problem. And that is that the world hasn't done before what the standards require companies to do. And there is a tiny amount of knowledge, and there's almost less experience in companies in doing what they're required to do. So Carolyn and I decided to create the ESG Exchange. It is a platform, and our first ever deployment, because of Professor Mervyn King's involvement, of course, was to focus on Africa. Africa as the tip of the global South spear, as we see it. And we have partnered with the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, and just 2.5 months ago, launched a pilot, which is to capacitate, the tip of that spear is to capacitate up to 300,000 accountants and 700,000 non-accountants across the continent over the next 2 years. So we have 700 accountants from across 14 professional accounting organizations across the continent, in 2 months' time, starting with French and Portuguese-speaking PAOs. And progress has been really spectacular. People undertake a program, or 6 modules in the program. I think about 250 people since last November, and most of the professional accounting organizations commenced, in fact, just in January. About 250 people have completed the first module, completed their assessments, they passed their assessments and so forth. 150 have completed module 2, and module 3, I think we've nearly 100 now have completed module 3. And what do people do, or what do they learn, what do they experience within the program? It's an exclusive focus on how to implement the standards. So, for example, when talking strategy, today I can link in to a partner platform, and we're an NGO. I can zero in on an asset, that is to say, a plant, a facility, an office building, and I can see the emissions that are associated with that. I can see who owns the building. I can see what they have said with regards to their transition plans for the future. I can see what they've said in their CSR reports, their ESG reports, or whatever. And of course, all of these reports are historic, because now we're into the new frame of formalized, standardized reporting. I can compare all of that information with the data that they have available that's coming through from them. So that's just one very simple example of the pace at which the world is moving, the pace at which AI and technologies are moving. I heard so many speakers speak about data in the course of the earlier conversation, and the dearth of data, the absence of good quality, reliable information. The reality now is that there is a huge amount of externally observable data available through satellite, remote sensing, and so forth. And it's good to know that that exists. All of that stuff is tied into the platform, which is the ESG Exchange, and we are here partnering with the Pan-African Federation of Accountants and 14 professional accounting organizations. Now, my first question goes to Melwa. Zika, you are the tip of the spear in Zambia in the context of this knowledge transfer into the professional accounting classes. and so forth. But there has to be a huge challenge there. It's about, whereas we're very familiar with financial accounting, we're now talking about sustainability related non-financial accounting and how the two can be connected and so forth. What do you see, Mwerwa, as the principal challenges in integrating these international standards into Zambia's professional training, firm level education and so forth?
Thank you very much, Mr. Duffy. Yeah, so integrating standards like IFRS, S1 and S2 in Zambia does give us challenges. These challenges usually are in this regard due to shortfalls in skills or limited technical capacity, as well as high implementation costs, and obviously, as has been said already, having reliable data systems. Regarding integrating the standards in professional training, ZICA obviously provides professional training to its members on different standards. So the training that we offer is not only on the sustainability standards, but even new standards like IFRS 18, IFRS 19. We obviously arrange training on those. But in this case, I think the standards that are really critical at the moment are IFRS S1 and S2. And yeah, so the challenge that we face as ZICA in terms of providing this training is really identifying skilled facilitators with the right capacity to be able to provide training on the standards that will ensure that we upskill our members, different accountants, people involved in sustainability reporting, preparation of sustainability reports, that these people are adequately adequately upskilled, and they'll be able to roll out these standards. We also need to identify the right partners who can provide other forms of training beyond what we are providing in terms of maybe online training. And that will also ensure that people are upskilled in terms of the training. But secondly, we also offer exams as ZICA. Whenever new standards are issued, and critically sustainability standards, IFRS S1 and S2, these need to be incorporated in our exams, in our syllabi, and also to ensure that examiners are upskilled for them to be able to provide training, to be able to provide exams to students, so that students are actually trained on the new standards, but also that they are examined on these new standards. So we also need to ensure that we effectively upskill our examiners in terms of being able to provide exams that are effective, that effectively capture what the standards require, and to ensure that our students are trained in this regard. Yeah, so in terms of firm level practices, challenges include limited skills in our members, that is in the people who are implementing the standards in different organizations. And so our members require massive upskilling. Obviously, they face challenges to do with data availability, quality of data. So for example, sorry.
Okay, going. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so for example, we have been discussing already that challenges may have to do with, for instance, reporting on Scope 3 emissions under IFRS 2. And as has already been discussed, this is something that was being said that maybe there should be consideration that should be made for deferring implementation of reporting on Scope 3 emissions. So these are some of the challenges that we can see will be there at firm level practices as well. So all these, I think, call for specifically training from our side. And then also we see that for SMEs, who are significant in our economy, because obviously our economy is developing, and so a number of our organizations are SMEs. They obviously need to be upskilled, but the thing is that they do not only need to be upskilled, but also they find that there are challenges in terms of implementation costs. They may find it very difficult to be able to implement the requirements of the standards. To meet all those requirements in there, it might be something that might be costly for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mabel. Thank you. I should add, by the way, that ZICA is one of the participating organizations of PAFA pilot, and it has many members on the program that are availing the different modules, the templates, the tools, the checklist, doing the theoretical training as well as the applied learning. So in terms now, Didi, if I could call you out perhaps and just ask you the key considerations in applying the IFRS standards. You know, the standards require an awful lot. These data that are required are available, but they're quite hard to access, even though with technology they are findable, but they're difficult to find quite often. What, in your view, are the current constraints in data availability and internal reporting across companies? And how do you think these can be closed down? The standards requiring one level of quality of data on the one hand, and the constraints of data availability on the other.
I mean, I think we've already had a really rich discussion here. And, you know, I think one of the things that I often say is that, believe it or not, everybody is struggling with Scope 3 all across the world. And yet, you know, not to capture Scope 3 is to leave out a significant portion of risk and also potential opportunities. So my first response always is that, and let's focus on Zambia. Many Zambian companies are already collecting data that's relevant to ISSB disclosures. It's possible they just don't know it. If you think about Scope 1 and 2, and you think about fuel purchase records, electricity bills, generator logs, or talking about physical climate risks, people have been producing, let me speak from my experience in Nigeria, people have been producing environmental impact assessments, but they've been a compliance checkbox as opposed to a true risk assessment mechanism. So what's really powerful that I've heard today as well is the approach of the regulator and the Capital Markets Authority to speak about you know, collecting this data and complying with these disclosure requirements, not just in a proportionate way, which I'll speak to in a second, but also not from a compliance perspective, but genuinely from looking at those four pillars of, on the one hand, ensuring it's anchored in the highest level of governance and putting in place the right data systems in place, embedded in risks and opportunities, and of course also in the strategy, and then essentially grading from qualitative disclosures to quantitative disclosures. And let me use the example of Scope 3. So IFRS 2 requires companies to disclose Scope 3 emissions and also explicitly permits the use of reasonable and supportable information that is available at the reporting date without undue costs and effort. And, you know, in markets where supply chains are largely informal, or we've just heard from Zika, where there are a lot of smaller entities, you know, one thing to bear in mind is that the disclosures are requiring transparency about what you know, what you're estimating, and what you cannot yet measure. So one simple example might be even in the first year when you are deferring Scope 3, your disclosure is more decision useful to investors. If, for example, you're deferring Scope 3, but you say, we are deferring Scope 3 pending supplier engagement. And also another very interesting step is instead of looking at all 15 categories, you might also choose to write, we have identified, say, a copper producer like CEC, category 1, 11, and 15 as our most material categories. And we will quantify category 1 by financial year 2028. So that is a genuinely decision useful disclosure, even if you're not really putting in any numbers. Another thing to bear in mind is estimation. I mean, from a financial disclosures perspective, we do know, for example, when we are estimating the degradation of assets and we're putting in provisions, it's an estimation of the lifetime of an asset. So likewise, the standards actually permit spend-based or activity-based estimates using published emissions factors. So the requirement is actually not that estimates are perfect, but rather that the methodology is clearly disclosed so that you can actually assess the reliability of the number and engage towards assurance, which is obviously very important in terms of data credibility. And perhaps one more thing worth mentioning is just looking towards supplier engagement and looking at that as a long-run ambition and finding ways, and I think this is where we really need to put our minds to the task. How do we ensure that, for example, when we are looking at supply chains, and a lot of these entities are smaller entities or even informal sector entities, what estimates and what mechanisms, what geospatial tools, what technology can be used to collect reliable data without undue cost and effort, possibly even at an industry-specific level or at a country-specific level, so that there is a standard. Because one of the things that also is very powerful about what I have heard today is the link that has been made between these disclosures and capital flows and capital pricing, which is really an indication of the level of risk. And risk is assessed. So if you don't have any information as an investor, very often you will apply the worst risk rating. The more information, and that's the reason for this decision useful information and the investor material information that we focus on. And let me just weave in a little bit that question about double materiality that was asked here. You will notice, and I know we're very focused on climate right now, but one of the things that I picked up from the Bank of Zambia a few weeks ago is they've actually started looking at nature-related risks and opportunities, which are an intrinsic part of IFRS S1. And what they've realized is actually, but I can speak about this a little bit later, the number of industries that are actually quite nature vulnerable. And from a risks and opportunities lens, even from a purely financial materiality lens, you need to bear in mind that you derive your risks and opportunities by looking at your dependencies and your impacts. Because your dependencies and your impacts, for example, on water and agriculture, give rise to the risks and opportunities that then become investor decision useful as a disclosure and help you to better build the resilience into your organization and better access the capital that you require in the short term, the medium term, and long term. And in that regard, taking into cognizance also, if we shift over to the agriculture sector or even the mining sector, where there are smaller entities involved, taking the proportionate approach, including without undue costs of effort, including, for example, simple things like an entity that has limited sustainability professionals within an organization. We can see CEC is represented here by the Chief Financial Officer. So the first year disclosures may rely primarily on finance teams. And the fact that there is such strong connectivity between the financial statements and the sustainability related financial disclosures allows us actually to build on knowledge that already exists and to build that capacity over time, which is what, and I'll stop here, which is also the reason why such capacity building sessions and initiatives across Africa and peer learning sessions are so absolutely essential, because we need to tackle this not on a unitary, but on a multiplicity of actors perspective. And I'm super proud of Zambia for, being so collaborative in your approach and also having the courage to step in first. The thing about starting first does not mean you're more prepared than anybody else, but it means you start grappling with the issues before others do, and you can start finding solutions.
Thank you, Ndidi. Powerful stuff. One of the comments from the Zambian SEC earlier on that really struck me was the reason for full mandation was because it's anticipating a point in time where 100% of the GDP will be related to sustainable practices, sustainably viable businesses going forward. A hugely powerful statement. Mutale, you are the tip of the spear. You're one of the first organizations turning theory into practice. Taking these standards from a CEC perspective, you're a major energy infrastructure provider, and you're going forward now with a very clearly defined transition pathway, renewables and so forth. What are the big and basic practical challenges that need to be faced by organizations, and how is your organization doing that, Mutale?
In responding to that question, I'll try and link the sustainability standards. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Indeed, we can.
Oh,
yes,
sorry. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I was just saying that in responding to that question, I wanted to try and align the sustainability standards, IFRS S1, as they link into the Zambia Green Finance Taxonomy, which has been launched. Because from a business perspective, we try and see how the interplay of the various regulations come into play and how we can benefit, because we are there to create value for various stakeholders, and they need to read into these regulations as one. So one of the biggest challenges that we have in looking at that is that from an energy perspective, we have an issue of classification and interpretation of which assets actually could be deemed to be green and which assets are not green. Right. So if you think about it, we are an infrastructure business. We play in generation. So renewables is a tick. Everyone agrees with that. But as you look in the value chain, you get to transmission grids and modernization of the infrastructure itself. Then you start asking yourselves, are these investments actually part of the green investments? Can they qualify, and can you tick the boxes that are required for interconnectors, for example? Now, whereas there are enablers, I think there is no standard across the world, at least what we have seen on the classification. We think that there is ambiguity there, and therefore it's very important for us as players to try and see if we can get some alignment. I think there is also an interpretation risk from the parties who come in to verify, auditors and experts. Would they tick the boxes for these projects as green projects, and therefore they get the benefits? And this is more so that you get this very big push around greenwashing, which raises the bar in what you verify and the documentation burden that is required from that perspective. So we think that that's one of the issues that we are facing, and therefore it's very important that to some extent, there is alignment of the parties and there's capacity that is built. The second issue has already been mentioned. It's around data and quality. Now, I'll try to be very practical in my explanation, because sometimes when you talk about data, everyone is thinking, what sort of data is this, right? Let's give an example of just water usage. If you look at it from a Zambia perspective, most of the users of water, the consumption itself, is done by the businesses themselves who've dug boreholes historically, and then they utilize that water, which means that that water, most of it is not metered. Now, the moment you come here and you start saying, okay, how do you ensure that you link the water usage to strategy to make sure that you are efficient, which means the baseline is that you should meter your water. And then you have a strategy along how do you ensure that you operate in a sustainable way. Now, in order to ensure that your water is metered, then you need to invest in CapEx, in your metering systems and things like that. And then you need to have a system that captures that metering, which you never had before, right? I'm just using this very basic example of water. Now, that applies, can be extended to everything. It's energy efficiency when you start looking at biodiversity. And that system then needs to be in a form in which it can be audited. So we also see that the quality of this information, half the time it's on pieces of paper, it's in Excel, it can be changed. And how do you ensure that you actually have a system that is auditable? I think that becomes quite important, especially for businesses that are operating in this market. Specific for CSC, we've got a lot of legacy building, legacy infrastructure, and therefore data collection and validation itself. And audit trails becomes a practical challenge. And we need to have a baseline before we start moving forward. The third aspect is really around governance and systems. Again, in order to ensure that you have embedded most of these sustainability practices in your governance, you need to start with the top. Is the board ready? Is the shareholders ready? Now, whereas management, it's easier to upscale your skills, sometimes it's not so easy to ensure that the shareholders appoint directors who have these skills amongst themselves. And also you need to have the deliberate steps. What other competing trainings and capacity building do you have as a business? So we therefore think that it's very important that the board who are mandated to drive this, they have the knowledge, the skills, and then we start pushing this through across the value chain. The very specific or maybe technical skills that we need, the ESG analytics, at least in country, we believe that there's a shortfall. I think this has been spoken to. Sustainability reporting itself, the technical interpretation of these issues, we believe that there's a problem. So talking to, for example, the financing side or the justification from a commercial perspective, there's even a bigger issue. Why are we doing this? Cost of compliance versus cost of capital. Are we actually going to make money after we've done this? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that as we do this, we leave a world a better place, but also we create value from a financial perspective. So on one hand, we want alignment, which should improve access to ESG-linked facilities, ESG capital or green bonds, which as a business, we have tapped through those windows. But on the other hand, we have compliance costs. And unfortunately, our own journey on the capital market highlighted that we don't have skills in country. Now, not having skills in country for mostly the upfront costs and the compliance costs that come, whether it's the advisory costs, it's the technical studies, it's the verification of the approved green experts and the assurance itself. To date, I want to highlight that we've launched the green bond for 3 years. It's still being audited by outside audit firms, because in country, we don't have the capacity. Now, this is 3 years down the line. From the time we launched. So it's a real problem, and there's no problem in accessing experts from outside if the cost is comparable. From my perspective, at least if I'm looking at it from a financial perspective, other than them being available at the time when you need them. But the problem is If the cost is going to be significantly higher, there's withholding tax which has to be added onto that, then the big issue comes up on compliance versus cost of capital. I think overall, and in summary, what we are seeing is that we definitely need to upskill the technical expertise to make sure that there is alignment in what we are measuring. And we need to see if we can find standardized tools and methodologies, because this information is out there, but is it standard? Will CC and an other comparable company look at it the same way? And if it was possible, it would be good to have a platform where standard things can be tapped from there by the market to make sure that it makes benchmarking easier. It makes even the investors, they'll look at there'll be better comparison between one business and the next. Maybe I can leave it here for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mutala. I'm very mindful of what you were saying there about the availability of resources in country and what Ndidi was saying earlier on about the reliefs that are available in terms of undue cost and effort and so forth. And it's a very good segue into my next question, which is one for Melwa. But before I do that, I'm just conscious of time because we did start later than we had planned originally. And Chen-Ling, can you tell me where my hard stop is in terms of time, not just for this panel discussion, but also the Q&A, because we did promise people that we would start at a certain time and finish at a time. Chen-Ling, can you give me some guidance just now?
Yeah, I think you should have another like 20 to 25 minutes if you wish, because we already used some of the time earlier for a Q&A.
Fine. Thank you, Chen-Ling. So on that basis, then we might not get to the Q&A, but we'll certainly get to the second and third round questions. And the question where Mutala left things off just there is a perfect segue really into your space, the Zika space, which really is all about the national level and company level internal capacity gaps at the governance levels, the data collection levels, the internal reporting systems, and these pose incredible challenges for organizations. What kind of observations, what thoughts, what advice can you give to participants here regarding practical solutions or practical initiatives that you're familiar with, that Zika is familiar with, that you think are worthy of consideration? Melwa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Duffy, for that. Yeah, so in terms of, the greatest internal capacity gaps in implementing S1, S2, I think mainly lie in, like I said, data gathering of verified data. That is one area where we have seen possibly we need to work on. Then also the other issue is just that maybe the information may be there, as Dr. Ndidi said, but it's just that it's probably siloed. And so this kind of like maybe provides a challenge for people to consolidate the data and have it available. The other challenge has to do with governance, and this has to do with the fact that, I think Mutala touched on this, the fact that our boards, which are supposed to be responsible to oversee sustainability reporting, do not have the capacity to be able to do so because this is a new area. They need to be upskilled. They need to be trained on these issues. And so there is that challenge in terms of governance. Another area, has to do with data again. and this has to do with probably being able to use robust scenario analysis to be able to come up with information on sustainability-related risks and opportunities, as well as climate-related risks and opportunities. Obviously, because this is just being implemented now, to be able to have robust scenario analysis is something that needs to be developed. Probably initially, the scenarios which will be developed may not be that enhanced, they may not be that complex, and yeah, they'll be very basic, but obviously with time, we will see maybe an improvement in that. Yeah, but obviously, yeah, there are solutions which can be used even with these challenges, even with these gaps. Firstly, for boards, we need capacity building. And obviously, this is where institutions like Zika come in, where we provide annual training through workshops and webinars. But also, we must also state here that we have obviously partnered with Pan-African Federation of Accountants, as well as the ESG Exchange, to roll out detailed training on sustainability standards. And this training is very useful because it actually gives practical examples of how to go about implementing the standards. So even if where you talk about, for instance, data challenges, the training actually gives examples of how you are able to get this information, how you are able to find this data, and how you are able to consolidate it. And so this training is very useful, and we have initially rolled it out to pilot individuals, to individuals who are piloting it, to be able to see how useful it is, to make suggestions of improvements that can be made. And then also, we'll then plan to roll it out to our entire membership. We have membership of about 10,000 members who are accountants listed with the Institute, and we intend to roll this training out to them so that we can provide support to them, provide upskilling services to them on this issue. And this training will not only be rolled out to our members, but will also encourage, we'll also encourage board members who will inform institutions to also get other people who may not necessarily be involved in preparing the reports, but who are responsible for oversight, to also participate in this training. And then also, apart from providing training, there are other ways of getting around the challenges. For instance, when we talk about challenges to do with gathering data on Scope 3 emissions, there is also the possibility of being able to use estimates rather than being able to rely on direct measurement methods. And that is another way in which we can get around the challenges to do with data in that regard. So I think in short, that's what I'd be able to say.
Thank you, Melwa. Just with regards to the program that your members are on and the ISSB Exchange, I'm conscious that people might be a little bit anxious about the demands for the quality of data, notwithstanding, the undue cost and effort reliefs that are available there that NVIDIA has called out. But be aware, there's an awful lot of stuff that is internationally proven and accepted, very high quality and freely available. For example, the kind of tools that we integrate through the PAFA Sustainability Center of Excellence, the use of scenario analysis tools for qualitative and quantitative analysis, right down to asset level and so forth. That's available today through the platform, templates, the workbooks, the spreadsheets for gathering all these data. This is not rocket science. This is big and basic practical stuff. It's tough in the first round, but it's so much easier second and third time round. Governance, anyway, you made reference to that. You know, recommended governance frameworks, management directive stacks, policies, controls. A lot of this stuff already exists. That's available through the programming and so forth. Now moving on, in Didi, you're very much kind of caught in the middle, as it were. You're the international standard setter, working closely with, for example, the Zambian SEC in terms of the supports that you and the regulators can provide to companies that now have to make this transition, not because they're told to, but because they have to, because investors, bankers, insurers are looking for this information from them. And I'm asking you, what kind of things can you and the regulators do, or are there particular lessons that you've taken from other emerging markets in terms of supports that you can give to companies in Didi?
Okay, I think, you know, I think this is a very, it's very important and powerful to hear a regulator that's saying we're not just issuing and enforcing these standards in Zambia, but we also see ourselves in the role of capacity building the capacity of the market. And I think one thing is, yes, investors are demanding this information, but on the other hand, the truth is they are very real risks. Take the case, I believe, in Zambia, where there was a national emergency, just to go back to that question of water, that led to the shutdown of the Kariba North Bank hydropower station. That has direct implications for energy costs, for agricultural output, for even financial sector stability. So part of the reason for the why, and I think the why is really so important, is because we're building resilience into the economies, and we're doing a forensic insight on the risks and opportunities of a specific entity that enables that entity to build resilience, not just as an entity, but also with its supply chain and value chain. So it really is not about compliance. I think a very important point that was made earlier is about building on the policy foundation that exists. Zika's mandate in terms of the aligning with global standards, and also very importantly, helping to shape those standards. And I'm so proud of the fact that, you know, when we did our first agenda consultation as the ISSB, I must say to you that Africa made 0% contributions in terms of comment letters, in terms of what the ISSB should be focused on in its standard setting, 0. And in the last industry-specific standards, I was so proud when we got the results and we saw that Africa as a continent contributed 19% of the comment letters. And I just want to encourage you, because next month, just talking about electricity, there will be 3 additional industry-specific standards looking for input. The agriculture standard is one of them. Meat, poultry, and dairy, which is very important also to Zambia, agriculture, of course, as well, and then also electric utilities and power generators, also very key, and also linked to one of the sustainability bonds that we were talking about earlier. So shaping what the future of global standards will be to make sure that even beyond proportionality, they actually speak to the realities on the ground, cannot be done in the air. It can only be done if you're really engaged and participating as well. And likewise also with the proportionality mechanisms. And I think, you know, having standard methodologies that are used, for example, across the African continent, which is why I'm such a big fan of peer learning and you know, sharing best practices, and the comment about the taxonomy and the classification systems, which of course, as the ISSB, we don't get involved in, but it's a very, very important detail. And I think the African Development Bank did a major piece of work on that last year that's worth building on. To your question about lessons from emerging markets that can be built on, I think one we heard from South Africa today, and a lot of that is really also about building on the existing culture. So South Africa has a very strong culture of governance and obviously also had adopted significantly TCFD and otherwise. And so there's a lot there, and also integrated reporting, which becomes, in fact, when you read IFRS S1 paragraph 2 and into 3, you will see that that is drawn from integrated reporting, where it speaks about the interconnectedness of society, the economy, the natural environment in which we operate, the stakeholders, and then also explicitly calls out that impacts and dependencies give rise to risks and opportunities, and that's why it's important to look at those. If I think about Nigeria, and I think about a lesson that would be useful also based about the discussions we've had here, is Nigeria started first, but they're not going to be mandatory for public interest entities until 2028. And in fact, what they did last year is that they revised the roadmap because there was a lot of pushback on voluntary adopters. So as early as 2024, you had early adopters and voluntary adopters. Right now, there are about 40 voluntary adopter and early adopter entities in Nigeria that are undergoing training. And what the regulator did is they're actually engaged also with partners in training the boards and educating the boards and raising the awareness of the why with the boards, because sometimes within an organization, it's difficult to communicate upwards. So that's an interesting thing potentially to pick on. It's only mandatory, for example, for smaller entities in Nigeria from 2030. So phasing was very, very important in terms of the approach that they took, and starting early as well. If I think about Kenya, Kenya's very strong focus was about focusing on the profession, even before it was mandatory, even before it was publicly launched. What happened is that the profession became part of the Sustainability Steering Committee. ISPAC, like Zika, oversees the accounting standards. So really just making sure that accountants and auditors or assurance methodologies were involved and engaged in the process. I think Zika is working with you. I think ISPAC is also working very closely with you at the ESG exchange. And obviously, PAFA plays a very critical role in terms of helping with that cross-sharing across countries and also peer learning. If I think about another example, Rwanda, I think Rwanda was the first to lead with or in partnership with development partners and unlocked essentially approximately $200 million on the back of adopting the ISSB standards. So keeping the eye on, where the capital flows are, and that question about the cost-benefit analysis is really important. What is the cost of compliance? What is the cost of capital? And really having a very driven focus on, which I already see as a very strong case with Zambia, again, having listened to the SEC today, Zika, and previously to the Bank of Zambia, where, it's actually thinking also about orderly transitions and just transitions, and has already estimated that the credit losses will be approximately 19% less because of an orderly transition as opposed to a disorderly transition. So thinking about it from the perspective of the capital flows that one wants to unlock, thinking about it from the perspective, and it's a very, very good point that was made that the CEC green bond 3 years later, and I think it was about $200 million program, is still being audited externally. Yes, that's a downside, and yet on the other hand, it's a very powerful best practice model that was developed, that was oversubscribed, and has gone through several tranches that are also listed. So big success story that really should also be told so that other people can follow that example, and so that we can figure out ways of addressing the challenges even faced in that regard. So those are some of the examples that I can think of, and I think that, you know, Zambia, again, even in terms of future standard setting, and let me just come back to that question of, there was an example about water usage, you know, and the nuances and the details of actually being able to track water as a metric, water quantity, water quality. And I'm aware that there was a study in Zambia to understudy the material dependencies on ecosystem services like water, soil health, and supporting services for agriculture and ecosystem services, etc., that are quantifiably at risk, both under climate, but also under nature stress scenarios. And so beginning to look at that and looking also from a you know, spatial risk picture, which actually feeds nicely into compliance from the IFRS S1 and S2 perspective, but more importantly is building the resilience of Zambia, which, if I think about the Bank of Zambia again, its loan book is heavily concentrated in sustainability, nature-sensitive, climate-sensitive areas. And so a proper understanding of those risks and those opportunities are quite significant in terms of ensuring long-term resilience for the economy. So I think I'm just saying that that why is very important, and that there are many examples across the continent, not least the architecture of Zambia between the mandate of compliance, the taxonomy that's been put in place, and the recent Green Economy and Climate Act change that was created in 2024. It's a very strong architecture that lays the foundation for the future.
Thank you, Ndidi. I'm going to ask my second question. It might be my last question. Chenling, you can tell me whether I have time. I suspect I might not have time to get to the third round question, but I have a really critical question to ask Mutale. Almost kind of maybe you're being asked to answer a question on behalf of industry, pretty much. So in so many jurisdictions, in particular in Zambia, we have significant regulatory support coming out from the SEC and so forth, guidance notes, phase implementation timelines, an abundance of information. But I got two questions for you. From a practical perspective, from a company perspective, in your experience, I'm asking you to answer this in the context broadly for industry. What types of regulatory support would be most helpful, more helpful for companies like CEC? And then separately, how can regulators balance this kind of, timeline that we're on between credible reporting on the one hand and market readiness, because we don't have the internal capacity here just yet. So two questions there, if you could, Mutale.
No, thanks, Peter. Look, I think from my perspective, there should be a recognition of the ability of the different players in the market, their ability to absorb costs, their ability to put in systems, their ability to ensure that they can capture and comply to the rules that are coming up, I think as a first step. And the second aspect is to isolate the big boys out, right? Those with high impact on the subject matter from a compliance perspective. We therefore think that there should be continuous industry dialogue and feedback loops between the industry and the regulators. We think that the regulators, I think Mwelwa mentioned this, but it's more important to highlight it as an issue, that the regulators should, to some extent, try and institutionalize the regular consultation forums with the market, right? And this should not be one way, so it should be iterative, so that there is a feedback process, which then goes back to help them to review the rules that they have, and also it helps to address some of the issues that I mentioned earlier. Are there any classification mismatches, unintended exclusions, and things like that? We can also talk about where we are using estimates. Can we have one framework or methodology? There's a toolkit, some form of sheet which helps to say this is the methodology that we are going to use. Because the trouble that is there is that to the extent that there are a lot of methodologies out there, we'll start having problems with the verifiers, the auditors themselves. They'll be coming up with all sorts of rules and we'll spend more time arguing on which methodology is right. But if this whole thing is coming through from a regulator's perspective, we think that that would help. I think the second aspect is how can the regulator balance between credibility with market readiness, the point that you raised, right? We think that from our perspective, this is very important, and it's an important trade-off. If you are too strict, there is low adoption. If you are too loose, then there is a loss of investor confidence. So how do you actually ensure that you've balanced that? I think that as an issuer, it's very important that we maintain a very strong core, which is non-negotiable. Because that will allow for the investor confidence to remain there. It will preserve the credibility of the players and the information that is there. However, I think that there should be safeguards. And these safeguards will essentially come into the flexibility on how the companies get there. Right? I think there should be sufficient flexibility in the process and not necessarily the standard. So on the transitional disclosures, maybe we start with partial alignment reporting, spoken to the use of reasonable estimates, provided that the estimates, there is some standards that we can use. We acknowledge that the data systems and the governance structures will take time to build, and therefore this should allow for transition. We allow for some form of proportionate application per company size. Companies like CEC, which can absorb more costs, can have access to resources, can probably be amongst the leaders, Zanaco, the big ones. The other ones then can follow, and even the threshold there can be lower to help the industry to adapt, and then they'll be following through what others have done. But there's a third point, maybe talking to not so much from Welwa's perspective, but I'll talk to what the SEC said. This needs to align to the incentives that are there. In Zambia, we've got alignments and incentives on the green bonds. But we think that it's important from a policy perspective that this is viewed from a context of an overall cost of doing business in Zambia to ensure that the products that are produced in Zambia are competitive internationally. And this whole sustainability reporting, Zambian taxonomy, should help the overall pack to make Zambian products more competitive, and therefore what's the preferential access that is there? What's the link for those who are complying? Is it just tax incentives? Is it faster regulatory approvals? Is it exemptions for certain filings? We need to think through how it links in all of that. But in summary, I think what I'm saying is that we need some form of early stage for the most valuable regulatory support that we are looking at should be not additional compliance, but more around clarity, capacity, and collaboration and refinement. The second aspect is practical tools, phased implementation, access to data, which is common. If we can get a framework, even better. At the same time, we need to maintain the robustness of the core principles that are critical to preserving the investor confidence. I think the balance for me lies in keeping a very high standard and allowing a more flexible pathway to how we get there. Let's allow companies to build systems. Let's allow companies to even know what they are doing. Because if the board are just being trained now, give them time to know and appreciate the risks from their strategy, come up with a strategy, and then they improve on the data quality. And then slowly they progress to align without undermining the credibility of what they're supposed to be doing. I think that would be my takeaway point.
Thank you, Matale. Thank you so much. Really powerful stuff there from you. Keeping an eye on the chat, and I can see that we are going to go for a Q&A, which is excellent. But I'm going to ask one more question, but I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to squeeze their answer into a minute. I think a good Q&A moderated by Chen Ling would be important. And it is this. My one question for each of you, given the current landscape of reporting and the capacity gaps and so forth, and the really full explanation of the opportunities, but the challenges that are here in front of us in the context of sustainability reporting, the investor demand for information, and so forth. Each one of you, one question, one answer in a minute. What is the single most important action that your organization, that is to say, the people that are participating, watching in here, what's the one thing you would say to listeners, participants here today, that their organizations should do in the next 12 months to strengthen the quality, the consistency, and so forth of their organizations and information that they have to get ready, either to report formally to, if they're listed, or importantly, perhaps, and for most organizations, reporting to corporate customers and so forth. So big and basic question. What's the one thing you think organizations should do to get ready now in the next 12 months? Going back to Melwa, and then I'll go to Ndidi and back to Matale then. Melwa.
Yeah, so for me, I think what I see as the most critical thing that needs to be done right now at the moment is capacity building. I think that would be the main thing I would like to ask organizations to focus on. Find the right training, the right capacity building for those who are involved and those who are overseeing sustainability reporting, because once you do that, then you're going to ensure that people have got the capacity to be able to implement what the standards require, and looking at the landscape that we have currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Melwa. Ndidi.
From everything that I've heard, I think all the speakers today that are in Zambia, especially our two speakers on the panel, should actually be part of a consultative group. I think consultation and alignment, methodologies, standardization, application of the standards is going to be the most important thing, and that will help to shape where the capacity is built, because the capacity needs to be built at the board level, but also at the practitioner level, at the practical level. I think there needs to be, I think having alignment among the capital markets, the regulator, the Bank of Zambia, the policymakers, and creating that alignment also to incentives and to trade and investment in particular is going to build a very strong why. And I think peer learning is going to be very critical. What needs to happen very soon is to have targeted, I really love the idea of targeted larger entities that can afford to invest and peer lead this, and that those can then serve as, reports that can become the standard or the best practice model that others can follow. I think the sooner that one is able to do that, and it seems to me that CEC is a good case study for that. I'm sure there are others as well. So collaborative engagement, best practice models, and just getting started, and leveraging all the proportionality mechanisms that already exist.
Thank you, Ndidi. Same question to you, Matale.
No, thanks, Ben. I think for me, the most important action from our business, because we've sort of moved on, we've done certain things, we're ahead of the pack. I think the big issue is for us to invest in a more robust, centralized sustainability data and governance framework. For us, that is because we've got information in silos, in different systems. Just putting it together is not easy, considering the time scales in which we have to produce these reports and for them to make sense. So at the moment, my guess is that the biggest gap is not in policy. I think it's in the ability to generate consistent, auditable, and useful information for decision making. That is there. That's what we are seeing, at least from our end. Therefore, we think that strengthening the internal systems, standardizing the methodologies, and to some extent, and more importantly, ensuring that there is an embedment, not just in the reports, but we've embedded sustainability in the governance across that. We think that this can significantly improve the quality and credibility of our disclosures, while more importantly, ensuring that sustainability reporting translates into some very real operational and investment decisions. I think that's where we want to go, and that's where we want to be. Thanks.
Thanks, Mutale. Conscious of time, Chandling, handing back over to you now. I see we have one question there on the chat, but perhaps you've been monitoring the chat as well, and maybe you've identified particular questions that you'd like to have put to the panel. So,
great.
Chandling, if you'd like to come on, and I'll hand over to you in that regard.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter, and also a really high grades to the dear panelists for the past hour. Actually, it's slightly more than 1 hour. Yes, I did see actually one question. This is for Mr. Muelwa and also Ndidi, saying, I'm an environmental engineer and have noted that environmental monitoring professionals are the ones on the ground collecting air, water, soil emissions data, and yet the capacity building conversation often stops at finance and compliance level. Not really, but yeah, I think I get your point. How can we create a formal structured pipeline that connects environmental data collectors to sustainability reporting process? So who shall come first? This is for
I'll be very,
yes, Ndidi,
yeah,
please.
I'll be very quick. I think in many ways, Mutale actually spoke about that, the importance of, and let me just put on my not standard setting hat, but my former preparer hat. So when I ran sustainability and governance for the Dangote Group, the most important thing was creating that internal alignment between risk, operations, finance, and the sustainability function, so that that data actually feeds into not just reporting, but also into your operations, into your risk management, and has a direct reporting line also to your risk committee, very often risk and audit committee at the board level. So this is really where the IFRS Foundation's ISSB standards, if they were available at the time, would have definitely helped me, because it's about bringing sustainability-related financial disclosures into the financial statements, as opposed to what we currently have in many companies, where as an environmental professional or engineer, you're collecting data, but you're kind of siloed from the finance function, the risk function, the operations function, and the data that you use is not being operationalized to really help the company build resilience. So really breaking those silos internally, I think, would really help. And very often that starts at the top. The board impetus is very powerful in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ndidi. Muelwa, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Yes. So what I would say is that what is key, I think what is critical, is to ensure that implementation of the standards is actually embedded in the organization. And like I mentioned earlier on when I was making the presentation, I said some of the challenges that we see is the fact that, information is siloed. You'll find that there is information in the risk unit, information in the finance unit, information in the operations unit, and all this information, is very critical to be able to generate reports on sustainability. But the problem is that the information is siloed. And so what is very key and what is very critical is to ensure that those silos are removed. And I think what is important is to be able to actually have, first of all, oversight implemented for the sustainability standards, and then giving possibly one person responsibility in management to be able to ensure that they bring all these units together in terms of being able to generate that information and to ensure that that siloed mentality is actually removed. But also, I think that even as we were saying, as Zika, that there's this training which is being rolled out to begin with. We are saying we're starting with our members. It's not really just meant for accountants, this training. The training that we're offering in conjunction with the ESG exchange, with PAFA, and even the annual sustainability training that we offer as Zika. It's not necessarily just meant for people in the accounting sector. It's meant for everyone who is involved in implementing sustainability reports, sustainability issues. And so what is important is what the key thing is just that the accountants are just the contact people for us because they're the ones who we are in contact with. And what is important is that each of these accountants needs to ensure that they identify who are the critical people in terms of implementing sustainability issues and then bringing them on board as well. So even other people who may not be accountant, they also need to participate in this training which is being offered, and we'll be more than happy to have them on board as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Muwawa. Didi, you want to add?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say the point that we've just heard right now, Muwawa, is something that we're seeing across Africa. This message is not clear. And I think the regulator leaning in to say this is not just about accountants, this is actually a cross-functional integrated thinking approach that an entity needs to take, and explicitly saying that the capacity building opportunities are open to all, and in fact encouraging entities to send various representatives across different functions within an organization to the same training can be very enriching from the experience that I've seen.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Ndidi, for the addition. Maybe I also want to add one or two more points to these. So from our point of view, because CASI is also a platform to hold such capacity building or maybe training opportunities, we do actually hope to reach out to maybe to make a deeper dive to all potential participants to such opportunities. The issue is we do not have all those contacts. Normally what we do actually is to spread the information, disseminate through our networks and also through them to broader participants. Like today, we actually reach out to the SEC and maybe other partners like the ESG exchange first, and then through them, gradually, I think more people can come. Through, I think the regulators, they probably will go to the regulatees. That means the listed companies, and then companies can pass on the message to the professionals, including, I think, the engineers and everything. So we do hope to actually gradually accumulate this information. But one thing, so we need to give some time to allow the penetration of the information to the professionals gradually from our network to broadly. And after today, you actually are already part of our network. We will be able to including you into our future distribution network, and you will be able to receiving training opportunities in the future, at least under CASI. So thank you very much for that questions. Okay, is there any further questions to either the panelists or maybe to earlier speakers of the session today? Just in case, those who are still interested actually haven't finished the registration yet. We have, I think my colleague Ning Hui has just shared the registering link in the chat once again. So to collect, maybe to tell us your contact information, because for those who participate the webinar, the event today will automatically win a 2-week free trial opportunity under CASI Academy. It is not only an opportunity of training, but also learning and also peer learning. And our online learning contents are currently offered in multi-languages, and it's being developed in different formats, mainly in the format of videos. So we'll give you at least 2 weeks of opportunity of accessing to these topics, including on sustainability, to explore what we have, and also maybe future opportunities of joining our future events, including the next bigger event we are holding in early June, probably in Morocco. So we'll maybe send you more information at a later date and when the agenda is available. So considering we're right on time, once again, thank you everyone for joining the technical assistance webinar today and for joining, keeping with us, staying with us in the past 3 hours. Taking this opportunity, I would be very happy to say thanks to our co-host, the Zambia Security Exchange Commission, and also support PADA, the ESG Exchange, and also all the great participants and sharing. I also see some people are asking if you can get the slides for today, especially the first 4. I think we'll get the consent from speakers first. Once they are agreeable, we'll be able to share with you through email, or maybe post them on some of the CASI website. So once again, please stay with us and stay posted. Register yourself through the link shared in the chat to follow us on CASI Academy, and also we will provide you the opportunity of free trial for 2 weeks. So thank you once again, and see you soon in the future. Have a nice day.